Hi, welcome to Random Access. I am René Mendoza, and I'll be your host for this segment of Random Access. Like I said, I am joined by Mike and Nick, who are fishermen. And so, Nick, tell us a little bit about how you started fishing. Like, what got you into fishing?
Yeah, actually, I can remember fishing when I was really, really young, and I hated it, actually, because my dad used to take me, and it was like the boring fishing where you throw the line in the water and the bobber's sitting there, and you have to wait, 2 hours maybe at some time for something to hook on. So that's kind of my earliest memories of fishing. And then just recently, probably within the last year and a half or so, Mike and I really got into bass fishing, which is a little bit more active and a lot more fast-paced.
So your first fishing, like what was the worst memory you had of fishing, like the very first time?
Just sitting there and waiting. I think just being bored, like sitting on a dock and nothing's happening, and you're like, well, really isn't that fun.
Okay.
So that's probably my earliest memory, yeah.
What about you, Mike?
I started fishing probably when I was about, I want to say, 7 years old. I remember my dad taking me to sure catches when we were, me and my sisters were younger. And ever since then, I just kind of like fell in love with outdoors and fishing. I come from like a family of fishermen. My uncles fish, my dad fishes, my grandpa fishes. So it's kind of something that's just in our blood. And yeah.
And so, what about fishing rods? Like, is there any special training you do, or just grab a rod and go out to the lake or wherever and start fishing? Or do you guys have some kind of training?
I mean, before, like when I was a little bit younger, pretty much just grab anything and just go for it. But like Nick said, within the last year, gets a little bit more technical than that. Different setups for different baits, different scenarios.
So can you give me an example of a different setup or a different bait?
So, for example, so we fish the Delta a lot. There's a couple different things that you can do in the Delta. There's punching, there's frog fishing, and there's finesse and plastic worms. So frog fishing is pretty much just putting a frog on and letting it skip across the top of the water. And the bass usually look up, and they see it, and it attracts them. They'll come up, and they'll come and smack it. Punching is pretty much finding heavy mats in the Delta, finding a lot of like coverage, and a lot of times bass during the summertime will submerge right underneath these mats, and they'll just look for baits to ambush. So when you're punching, you're throwing like things that they call like missile D-baits. So they kind of resemble like crawfish, and it resembles like crawfish like falling through the mats, and sometimes they come up and smack it. When they do, it's fish on, it's game time.
Yeah,
Cool.
when you're fishing those mats, you want to have a rod that's a little bit stiffer. That way you can pull them out of heavy coverage. If you have, speaking specifically on what kind of rods and stuff that we use, if you have a rod that's a little bit flimsier, you're going to have a harder time pulling a bigger fish out of heavier cover.
Okay, so would one of these work for?
Yeah.
So can you show us which one of those would work for? Was it punching or?
Punching.
Yeah.
Punching or flipping.
For punching, we don't have a punching setup tied on here right now, but it's an Abu Garcia. It's a 7'11" extra heavy, which basically gives you a little bit more power to pull them out. It's not going to bend as much. If I can reach the end of it here without poking your eye out.
Go for it.
If you can see when you bend it, it doesn't really bend in the middle as much as it does more towards the end.
Right.
And that's, again, so they call it a heavier backbone. So when it's thicker down here, it doesn't have as much bend, not as much parabolic bend in the rods. So you can pull the bigger fish out.
You want to be able to pull them out without the rod snapping.
Okay. And so I see that this bait too. Does it matter what kind of bait you have, or does it?
Yeah. So when Mike was talking about punching, again, we don't have a punching setup tied on here, but it would be similar to something like this here, which is just a jig. But with punching, you have a heavier weight that's actually located above the line. And so if you can kind of vision, there's water and there's some pads on the top of the water. What you're doing is you're flipping that bait on top of the pads and kind of getting it through the pad and letting it sink underneath.
Okay.
And then you're kind of pulling it up and down a little bit. So you need a heavier bait to kind of get past that heavy coverage on the top of the water.
So it sounds like a lot of setups, a lot of waiting for that. Do you find it relaxing too, or like why do you why not go bowling or having a couple drinks? Like why fishing?
Like I said, man, it's something that's just in me and Nick's blood. Even when we're out there and we don't catch fish, it's just being connected with the outdoors. It's the serenity that it gives us. Instead of sitting in an office, we'd rather be out there trying to find that monster.
So speaking of monsters, have you had catch anything that got away or caught anything that just like you had to share to the world?
You had that big one at Del Val.
I came across a couple big bass.
So I see it. We have it right here. Is that the one?
Yeah, that's actually that's my personal best. It's not that big, but it's my personal best.
How much is that?
That one weighed about 6.7 pounds.
Okay.
I got that actually fishing my first tournament. It was like the last hour of the tournament, and it was crunch time, and I just stayed consistent and ended up pulling that thing out, and it was pretty awesome.
What about you, Nick? Anything that you caught?
Yeah, when it was actually one of our first outings that we went to in Discovery Bay, which was February. Was it about February?
February.
Yeah, we got there, and it's a little bit harder that time of year just because the water is colder. The bass aren't as active and as aggressive hitting certain baits, so you kind of have to really, I guess, stay persistent and kind of slow your presentation down in the water, and you have to work a little bit harder for them. So the one that I caught was a little over.
We didn't have a scale, but I would say it was 10 plus.
Okay.
It was a pretty exciting moment for both of us.
Cool.
Yeah.
So have you had any I would hear every now and then people like fall into the water and get some kind of dangerous situations. Have you guys had any?
We kind of have it's like a phantom sea lion, I guess, whenever we're out on the.
So what do we have here on the screen right now? So you have, is that how many you caught? Like 4 fish at once, or?
So that was a tournament we did in Clear Lake. It was last month. We caught those. So we do a thing we call pre-fish, where when there's a tournament at a certain location, we will go either a day or 2 days before, and we'll kind of fish that location and kind of figure out what's called a pattern of what the fish are doing, what they're going to try to bite on, and try to outsmart them basically. That way, when the tournament comes around, we have an idea what we can use and kind of get as many fish as we can into our live wells and weigh those out at the end of the tournament. So the 3 fish that you saw in the picture there were the pre-fishing fish that we caught the day before the tournament started.
So is that the most you've caught at once? Was it 4? Like, what's the most you've caught? Like,
well, we catch one at a time.
Catch one at a time. I mean, there's been days where we've caught in a whole bunch of little ones, maybe 40 plus fish in one day. But that picture was actually our first time fishing Clear Lake, and we knew nothing about the lake. And Nick went out there and we pre-fished, and he executed it, and he caught a lot of fish for pre-fishing.
So what do you do after you're done fishing? Do you just throw it back in the water? Do you cook it, or?
Yeah, we're catch and release.
Okay.
We don't eat the fish. We don't keep the fish for any consumption reasons. We catch them and release them. We keep them in a live well. So when we're on our boats, we have a makeshift live well out of a cooler that's aerated, that's constantly circulating water from whatever waterway we're fishing.
And how is that kind of expensive, or just part of its?
No, I mean it's just we make it out of a typical 48 quart cooler, and then we have a bilge pump that sucks in water and spits water out. So it's all homemade off of the boats that we have,
cool.
And they can keep probably 4 or 5 decent sized fish in there. The issues,
Cool. So what about you, Mikey? So you have a smile on your face. You want to tell a story about you having? I heard a story about you had some dangerous tribulations.
There was a couple of dangerous encounters when we fished the Delta with sea lions, but the sea lion really wasn't after me. It was kind of after Nick. But,
So is this Nick's story, or you just?
He's not really fazed by the sea lion. I mean, we've run into him probably 3 or 4 times. Every time he surfaces, I always try to get to shore as quick as I can.
I mean, things look cute. You want to pet him.
He's just out there fishing still. So it's a tribute to him for sticking to it a little bit more than me. But I'm trying to keep my legs.
Right.
Yeah.
So what else do you guys do? What about your kids? You guys take your kids fishing, or?
I've taken my daughter fishing once. We took her up to Stevens Creek Reservoir, which was kind of a special moment. She caught her first fish, and she was pretty happy about. And she, surprisingly, she's a girly girl, so I didn't really think she was going to touch it. She had no problem touching it, but then as soon as it started to wiggle, she kind of had a meltdown. So, but it's all on video, so it's kind of a cool moment to savor and have the rest of your life.
I haven't taken my daughter fishing yet, but I've taken her to Santa Cruz.
That counts, I guess.
There's fish in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
So what else do you guys do besides fishing? Like with these rods, do you guys set them up too, or?
There's a lot of prep. Yeah, it's a lot of preparation. I think when we we'll go fishing usually on a Saturday every week, and there's probably 2 days before that that go into preparing on whatever location we're going to. It's part of being a fisherman. You have numerous amount of tackle and stuff that you have to keep organized, otherwise it just gets kind of thrown aside and you don't know where it's at. So.
And how do you decide which one is the rod to take, just on the destination, or?
They all go.
They all
yeah, so on our boats we have a 6 rod holder, so we carry 6 rods on us at all times, just so we can switch back and forth and make it a quick switch.
And so I saw earlier today you guys had little nets on them. I don't know if we have them, but there were little nets on the rods. What are those for the layman who don't know?
Those are rod socks, pretty much, because we do a lot of traveling. So to protect the guides of the rods, and pretty much just to make sure that the rods don't get too banged up. Or scratched up. You want to keep them in the best condition, even though they're fishing rods and they're going to get scratched up. like I said, when you're traveling, sometimes they get banged up or scratched up, so you want to keep them protected at all times, and especially with these rods, they're not the cheapest things in the world, so you just want to take good care of them.
All right. Cool.
They're like rod condoms.
So where do you guys go grab your stores? Like, what stores do you go to get your fishing rods?
I think Coyote Bait and Tackle in this area is probably one of the best stores as far as not only from the selection, but I feel like I'm plugging the store, but not only from the selection, but the people that work there.
It's like a mom and pop shop.
Yeah.
You go in there and pretty much ask them anything, and they give you, the best advice. Whether you're novice or you're at a professional level, they,
We're actually missing the Bass Pro Shop grand opening tonight to be here.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah.
So what is that about? Tell us about that. Like, what is that entail? What is that? What's happening? What
I think
happens
they're
there?
just doing a bunch of ceremonies. There's a couple of professional fishermen that are showing up. Kevin Van Dam, I think, is one of them. I've got a lot of guys who have been on the Bassmaster Elite series for a long time.
And I don't know what that is. What is the Bassmaster Elite?
It's kind of like it's like the professional fishing circuit. So you have like Major League Baseball and the NFL. The bass fishing has their own federation or whatever you want to call it that has their elite series of anglers that compete for that top
Are there
rank.
also rules for the?
Oh yeah.
Can you give us some of the rules? Like what do you need to do to qualify to be in that league, or like what the rules are? Like do you get how does that work?
Yeah, I think you have to win a certain amount of tournaments at a lower level. It's kind of like if you think about like minor league baseball or something like that, where you have to advance through the rankings in order to get to that level where there's actually money and cars and stuff like that you can win from the tournaments.
Is that something either of you thought about doing, or?
I mean, it's something that we dream about, to eventually be on that level. But, we just started tournament fishing, so not sure if we're, on that level yet, but maybe one day
That's the thing about fishing. It takes a lot of time. I think that's what, if you want to be really successful and really good, you have to put in a lot of time and not just, once a week going fishing, but actually, live close to a major waterway where you can put in quality time fishing and learn.
It's not just hook, line, and sinker and getting out there. It's having multiple hours, on the water and just being consistent, being out there.
So for people who want to take fishing, what do you recommend? Like, what is the first thing that they should all know before they take up fishing?
I don't think you have to know anything. I think you just jump into it and learn as you go. I think that's kind of what we did really. Is I mean we might have known a little bit from either from our dads or from other people in our family, but I think we could both admit that we jumped into bass fishing kind of with no preconceived notions of what the right or wrong thing to do is,
and just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about, do you guys do any ceremonies before you go fishing, like any prep games or like psych yourself up to go fishing?
I mean, we get
coffee.
We get coffee.
And that's it?
No, I mean, we get prepped up the night before.
Okay.
We'll talk about, where we're going, or sometimes I'll ask Nick, if he has a pattern for that day. Sometimes Nick doesn't want to tell me his pattern, so I'll just have to figure out a pattern myself. But that's okay, because, we're fishermen, and sometimes, you got to do it that way.
Right. You still got to compete.
Yeah.
So anything else that you guys want to talk about before we sign off? We're running out of time. Nothing?
No.
Any last words for new fishers or your fellow fishermen?
Just have fun with it. Enjoy it. It's relaxing. It's a good place to kind of go and just think and reflect and be disciplined.
Keeps you out of trouble.
Alrighty. Sounds good. Well, that's it. Thank you for joining us this time at Random Access. Again, thanks to Nick and Mike for joining us all the way from
Cupertino
and Sunnyvale.
Yep.
We'll see you next time. Bye.